Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com.
All right, and we are back, and this week I'm joined by Coach Karina.
Hi everyone, virtually this time. Unfortunately, we can't be in the same room this week.
I know, and I think I just messed up the intro the third time, but we're rolling with it. You know what? I don't care anymore. I'm joined by however the fuck Karina's joining us.
I'm starting this podcast, so we're off to a great start today.
Struggle. Honestly, Zoom is so much harder to do podcasts than in person. I don't know, for anybody listening who does record podcasts, it is so much better to do it in person, which is why so many of the top podcasters don't do podcasts that aren't live, just because obviously we know each other really well, so it's a little bit easier, but especially if you don't know somebody and you're trying to interview them, it's really hard to pick up on timing. And that's why you often hear people talk over each other on a podcast, because the timing is just a little bit off. So the other person thinks the person's done talking, but they're not. And then it's just but in any case, we are not talking about recording podcasts today. We are talking all about blood work. And I'm super excited for this because we have so many questions about blood work. And first of all, obvious disclaimer, we are not medical doctors, we cannot prescribe anything, et cetera, all those good disclaimers there. You guys know that we have degrees in the area, but we are certainly not doctors. So this is basic information. This is not to cure any issues that you might have. This is mostly for preventative, and as well as just giving yourself more knowledge so that you can go see specialists as needed. And that's what we're really all about. We are not going to sit here and say, hey, we can solve all of your problems. That would be amazing if a coach could fix every problem, right? If a coach was specialized in nutrition, training, mental health, hormones, gut, literally everything, that would be great. And while we do have baseline information in a lot of those areas, as far as specialties go, that's where specialists come into play.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I first started talking about this, however many years ago, people always ask, what is the blood panel that you always recommend? What is it? So we're going to go through it today. I'm definitely going to link it in the show notes for you guys. So anytime you need to, you can refer to this. And this is certainly not the only blood test, but it is one of the most comprehensive in our opinions to start. And if you are somebody who's in this space looking to improve your body composition and your overall health, which is pretty much what our company focuses on, this is a really good place to start. So tell everybody why we personally like Life Extension. Again, this is not the only company, but we do generally recommend people going to Life Extension for this reason.
So my favorite part, so there's two top reasons. My favorite part is the fact that after you get your blood work done, you can call them and they have a staff of very highly educated people. Oftentimes it's PAs in training and things like that, who will go over every single panel with you and kind of discuss, even if it's within range, okay, you're getting a little bit close to getting out of range, this is what we would recommend you begin to do with either diet, supplementation, maybe following up with more blood work. They literally take you step by step. I think last time I got my blood work done, it was almost like a 45-minute phone call because they are so thorough. And I think that a big part of being able to be in control of your health is just having the education, and they're just there to teach you. And it's really, really helpful, instead of just having a doctor, print out your blood work and then just prescribe XYZ medications or supplements, but never really tell you why or what could happen if you do not. Yeah. So that is super helpful. And that would be my favorite reason for suggesting Life Extension, because even though, I'll have clients go get the blood work done, I'll say, make sure you call them, because they're going to do a much better job than I could to explain, okay, what everything means. And then we would take that information together and say, okay, this is what we need to do moving forward with your nutrition or your training, or what you might need to add in supplementation wise. And then the second reason why I really love Life Extension is because I would say it's one of the cheaper panels And you don't need a doctor's note to get it done. So you can just purchase it whenever you need to or whenever you're curious. But I think that, the big question a lot of times with clients getting into improving their health, the question is always like, what do I need to take? What do I need to take? And that's a really hard question to answer until you get the blood work done. So you're not just spending money on bullcrap supplements that you probably don't need, and you can actually use your hard-earned money for the things that are going to benefit you most.
Or you might really need something and we don't know because you might not be feeling it quite yet. And so I would say that one of the best things, like you talked about, was you don't need a script, you don't need insurance. So there's a lot of people listening who maybe they need to test their hormones more frequently, or they just simply want to. Like, this is something that I try and go out of my way to do every 6 to 8 months, just to have like a little portfolio on myself to see how things are trending, because you're really guessing unless you have blood work. You can think, oh, I think based on my symptoms that I have X, but you really do not know until you get blood work. And oftentimes what happens, and especially in the world of supplementation, which I love and support, and we both are people who take supplements, but oftentimes things interact and you can't just take something and you think that it just like, oh, it's just going to affect this one pathway or this one molecule or this one hormone. It affects everything. And the same way that all blood work is interrelated too, right? So it's not just like, oh, hey, I'm having an issue with thyroid. Should I just test my thyroid? Well, let's test some other stuff too and see if that's impacting it as well. Maybe it is just the thyroid, or maybe it is the relationship between cortisol. Where are your other sex hormones? How is all this other stuff going, right? Like, so we want to see kind of this things build. And there's the problem oftentimes with going to the doctor to get the script, not all the time, but a lot of times, is just because it can be hard for them to write stuff because of the insurance. It's not anything against the doctors. Like, I have no vendetta against doctors whatsoever, but oftentimes the way that it works, especially in the US, with the insurance, is that it's always kind of like, okay, what's the least amount that we can do? So like, if you're like, hey, I feel like I'm having some thyroid issues, a lot of times they'll just test your TSH, which is not a bad marker, but it is the weakest marker. So if we're not getting the full picture, if we only have TSH and we don't have free T3, free T4, and ideally, if we can, reverse T3, we don't really have a complete picture. And sometimes, like, when your TSH is really off, then that means all the other things are off as well, right? So it's like, we could have prevented this if we might have seen it. So that's really the only reason that it can be frustrating sometimes. And it's often just due to the way that the insurance is all built and everything. So that's why I completely take all of that out of there. We recommend this. Obviously, if you have a doctor who wants to write a full panel, that's great. If some people, their doctors do that, or they work in the medical community, so they're able to do that, whatever it might be, cool. This is just a really great resource for people who don't have that option, or who just don't even want to deal with it like me. Like, I'm like, I don't even want to go calling the doctor to set up an appointment is annoying enough for me. So like, I just want to go buy this. You literally pay for it online, you print it up and you bring it, and that's it. It's so simple. And then they email you results. Like, it couldn't be easier. So that's number one. And then another thing too, before we dive into the actual, what we like to look at, it would be, okay, well, why would somebody get blood work? So somebody, if I'm your client, Karina, okay, hey, why should I be getting blood work? Like, what would be some of the things that you would suggest? Is this something that we're going to do like right off the bat, or is this something that kind of like down the line? Like, what does that look like?
So typically it's something that I will only bring up if I'm kind of seeing red flags with responses to your nutrition. Specifically, the most common situation I get is, okay, we're dieting and you're doing everything right. Like, we are killing our cardio. We are, staying on top of nutrition. We're managing stress. We're trying to sleep the best we can, et cetera, et cetera. But we are not getting movement for weeks and weeks on end. And that happens a lot. Not only for, maybe like hormonal factors, but we've recorded multiple podcasts on this, dieting history, et cetera. But all of that also has an impact on your hormones. So typically, I won't go to blood work right off the bat, but if, I try to be like as simplistic as possible, and I'll say, okay, this is our baseline that we're working with based on the questionnaire that you had sent us and the information I've learned from you so far via phone calls, via check-ins. But something isn't adding up. Like, you're doing everything right. There's got to be an underlying mechanism here. And oftentimes when we are doing everything right, on the surface, there's something going on metabolically that is hindering that progress. And so I'll tell people all the time, like, you can do everything right in terms of like calories in, calories out equation, et cetera, But if your hormones are out of whack, unfortunately, that's going to be for nothing, because that's your body's entire like regulatory system. And so typically, to answer your question, it'll be down the line if I see red flags for, okay, we might need to spend this money and check this out, because I think it's going to be absolutely worth it for you, especially if maybe we are doing a diet phase that we shouldn't be doing based on, where your hormones are at, or you need to be taking something that you haven't been taking based on where your hormones are at that could really help you in the future.
Yeah.
So that would be my number one scenario for having blood work done.
Yeah, so it's not something that, okay, this is the first thing that we need to do, but it is certainly something that's like, okay, this is like another tool in the tool belt. Like, people use that phrase, but that really is important here. Another few times this would be important. One, if you are a competitive athlete, whether it's a physique athlete or any other type of athlete, if you are pushing yourself constantly, especially if you're a physique athlete who's getting super, super lean all the time, there are going to be consequences to that. So you want to make sure that everything is in check. So if you want to have a career as an athlete, again, especially as a physique athlete, you're going to want to invest in blood work. No, do you have to do it to be successful? No, but it is certainly something that shouldn't be ignored. Obviously, this goes without saying, but if you are taking any kind of performance enhancing drugs that are manipulating your hormones, you certainly need to do blood work. That is going to be incredibly important, and that is on you to discuss with whoever you want to discuss that with, but that is a choice. If you're deciding to take those compounds, you need to understand that your health can change, and your hormones can change based on that. So don't just naively take that. Make sure you're staying on top of your blood work, and that's why having kind of consistent, every 6 to 8 months, even 12 months, if everything's kind of normal, like you don't need to get it all the time, but being able to go back and check, okay, well, if you don't have a baseline, it's really hard. So oftentimes when clients will send over stuff, it's like, all right, well, this is our first time looking at this, so we're not going to make any rash judgments here. Obviously, if something like really high or low stands out, we're going to need to address that. But if things are kind of still within range, but teetering one way or the other, well, we don't know, is this your normal, that you might be higher or lower and not really have any negative effects from it? We don't know. Or is this now higher and it used to be much lower? So that's where kind of having that catalog is really nice. And I can look back, and I have pretty much blood work from every year now for the past few years to say, okay, where is my normal range? And that's going to fluctuate within a healthy amount. But you do want to dial things in. So those are a few other reasons why you'd want to do it. And obviously, last but not least, if you are somebody who has either lost your cycle, or you are, trying to, get pregnant and all these kinds of things, you're likely going to need to regulate your hormones. If things are not, if things aren't working after several months of adding food and adjusting cardio, and, your just total energy intake in general, okay, maybe we need to look at this if it hasn't come back naturally.
Yeah.
So those would be some of the reasons why we recommend blood work, or when we recommend it to people. So let's go through it. So this life extension panel is called the Comprehensive Weight Loss Panel. Now, I didn't name this. This is not about weight loss. Like, for whatever reason, a few times I've posted this, people like, this isn't a weight loss panel. Okay, I didn't name it. It's not mine.
I always have to like preface, like when I'm sending it to clients, like, I know we're not trying to lose weight, like that's not what we care about, but this is what it's called.
Yeah,
I didn't name it.
And I understand why they call that, because it is all important things if you want to have like a healthy body composition. So like, I understand why they named this, but don't yell at me, even though we're not trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
So first of all, it is going to look at your sex hormones. So it's going to look at DHEA sulfate. It's going to look at free and total testosterone. It's going to look at estradiol as well as progesterone. What I like about here too, which is pretty standard, but they make it very clear, like you're going to obviously put in your age, and then based on your age range and your sex, it's going to give you, okay, what is the range here? Because obviously if you are a male versus a female, or if you are a 20-year-old male versus a 50-year-old male, very different, right? For like what the ranges are going to look like. So it does a nice breakdown of that, so it's easy to understand. I've read some people, looked over blood work, and I'm like, oh god, this is really confusing. Like just the way that it's like written on the paper, and like the ranges and stuff. Like this is very simple, which I love. So it goes over all the sex hormones. It also goes over all of the thyroid hormones. So like we talked about before, there's TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, free T3, free T4, and then there's also reverse T3. So this is not included on all blood work, but it's basically oftentimes what people are talking about is, okay, reverse T3, and we're looking at that in relation to cortisol. So if reverse T3 is too high, typically means that cortisol is going to be high as well, which is going to inhibit how active the T3 can be. So that's why they like looking at that as well. And then there's also cortisol, which it's going to be a morning cortisol reading, because ideally you're going to be doing this fasted. Why are you doing this fasted? You are going to be looking at insulin related markers, which is next. And for any of these markers, you should be fasted, because it's going to be the most consistent. You wouldn't want to be fasted one time and then the next time it go at 2 p.m. After you've eaten 3 meals. That's going to be obviously very different. And then it's also going to be different for your hormone levels, because hormones do fluctuate throughout the day. So in a perfect world, you are doing this from what they recommend between 8 and 10 a.m. That's what they recommend for hormones. And then that's also lines up pretty nicely for the fasting for the other markers. Yeah. But if you do, you'll see a lot of people ask about cortisol with 4-point readings. So that's going to be obviously a little bit more invasive. I believe that's usually a urine test. It could be saliva. So don't quote me on that, but I know that the 4-point cortisol test is a common one. Do you need that right off the bat? Possibly not. You might, but that's where this would be helpful. Okay, is your cortisol super high and everything else looks good, and you're like, oh, this is kind of weird. Maybe you'd want to go do that test, but is it necessary? Totally up to you. So this is going to only read morning cortisol. And then there's also the insulin related markers that we just talked about. So insulin, ferritin, and hemoglobin A1C. There's also fasted blood glucose that's included with the the CBC, but that's also in there as well. So you're going to have fasted glucose. HbA1c is pretty much roughly a 3-month marker of how your blood glucose is doing. And then the insulin. So you don't have to be fasted to do this, but again, for consistency purposes, if you want to be consistent, you should probably be fasted for all of these markers, just so you know. But there have been times where, and you can order, this is a full panel. You can also order individual ones. So say you have an issue and this comes back and you do have an issue with your insulin, and you want to see, okay, well, how's my body tolerating insulin later in the day versus fasted? Well, you could just, then of course you would go in after you've eaten and like structure all that and et cetera, et cetera. So there are times you're going to not want to be fasted for that. But for this in particular, we'd recommend to do that because it's just going to be the most consistent. And the fasted insulin reading is very, very important. And fasted blood glucose is great, but it is very variable based on like sleep and stress. Whereas fasted insulin is a really good marker, and it's a little bit more consistent versus the blood glucose.
And if you tuned into the fat metabolism podcast, you would know why it's important to have insulin in a healthy range for you to lose body fat.
So Karina is nicely plugging another one of our podcasts that we did, which was actually a really good one. So yes, I support that. And then there's a few other just kind of like general health markers too. So there's going to be a CMP, complete metabolic panel. This is going to be things like AST, ALT, so like liver function, mitochondrial function, your cholesterol, your triglycerides, like all really important things. There's also going to be a CBC, complete blood count. That's going to be pretty standard stuff like red blood cells, white blood cells, all of those types of things. That again, this is going to be on most, if you get like a physical every year or something like that, would probably be on there. Yeah. Lipid panel, vitamin D, really, really important, and CRP. Really, really important.
Yeah.
So vitamin D, we've talked about before. Do you want to touch on that a little bit as far as like the ranges and why it's important?
I'm not really good with ranges right off the top of my head.
Okay.
However, I will say that vitamin D is probably like 90% of the time, especially in resistance trained people, a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D, and that's oftentimes the number one thing people have to start
oh my gosh.
with.
Yes.
But I can never like remember each volume off the top of my head. So you go ahead.
It's 50 to 80 nanograms per deciliter is what is recommended by most health experts. Now, the range, which is why this is important too, that you get this full panel. It's not just somebody saying, hey, it's normal, because the range is 30 to 100. And while, okay, that is the range. So say you're 31, like you're in range. So, okay, this is normal, but is that an optimal range? Just like a 99 is in range, but that's not optimal either.
So be like a week away from being out of range. And that's why I really love talking to them, because you can look at it and say like, oh, I'm within range, everything is fine. But they'll tell you, like, if you keep going this direction,
yes,
these are all the consequences that could happen.
Yes. So yeah, 50 to 80 nanograms per deciliter is where you want to be. And one of the easiest things with vitamin D, and again, you're going to need to test this, is just say, all right, I'm going to start supplementing, and or getting sun exposure. Honestly, guys, it's even if you go out in the sun all the time, the amount of sun exposure you need is a lot, and you need to be like fully naked. And like, it's not just like, oh, I went for a 10-minute walk, I got my vitamin D for the day. Like, no, it's a pretty intense sun exposure. And then of course you're running the risk of skin cancers and all these things. And so I'm not somebody who's just like throw a pill on it, but vitamin D is one of those that's like honestly so easy. Now, do we recommend getting sunlight for other reasons? Yes. But as far as getting your vitamin D levels, probably stick to supplementation. But yeah, I would say that honestly, probably, and I'm not even exaggerating this, at least 80% of people when I see their blood work, they're low on that. Unless they're supplementing already, then they're pretty good to go. And then C-reactive protein, so that's going to be a kind of whole body inflammatory marker. And again, health experts discuss things differently depending on where they would like this. Most people say under 3, and then for people who really care about their health, they say under 1 is kind of what you want to see. And now this is going to go up during periods of obviously high inflammation, if you have high stress, if you have an injury. Like I got tested one time and I had my CRP was 10, but I just had an injury flare up. So I was like, either I'm going to have a heart attack or this is the flare up. And then when I retested it, it was back down. So it was one of those things that is, okay, well, I need to look into this and what else is going on in my life. And it can help you reflect on that too. So that is going to be everything that's included on this test. This one in particular is $250. So really not that bad.
It goes on sale a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually it's on sale right now. So if you want to get it, guys, go get it. I buy them. They last for several months. You don't have to like buy it and use it like that next day. So I'll usually buy it and then just kind of keep it around. And like I said, how much you need to test is going to depend on you, depending on what's going on in your life. What have you been changing? Did you lose your cycle? Did you gain a bunch of weight? Is your hair falling out? Like there's all these different reasons why you would be going to get this done more or less frequently. And this is not the only panel they have. When I tell you everything there, they have everything, and you can order just one single value, or you can get a few put together, or they have full panels like this, so you don't have to, put all these things together. They have other tests too, as far as like urine tests and stool tests and all that too, which again, if you want to do that, that is, look into that more. If you want to consult with them before, that would be another great thing to do. Be like, hey, I'm having XYZ symptoms. Which one out of these tests do you think would be useful? And then they'd probably be able to give you a better response. And so there's a few other companies like this, but like Karina said in the beginning, this is certainly one of the most cost-effective ones, and they have an awesome staff, and I can vouch for that too because I've been using them for years. I've known people who have worked there, and the training they go through is very extensive, and a lot of them are either working towards higher degrees or actually even have them. So it's pretty cool. It's not like they just like hired like anybody off the street, like just answer our phone calls. Like no, this is like there's
rigorous, like medical trained individuals. And like, we are not sponsored by Life Extension. However,
if anybody's listening from Life Extension,
like to sponsor the podcast, we've been fans for a hot minute. So
seriously, I feel like if anybody wants to give me a discount code for the link, like, this shit out to like thousands of people. But yes, no, we have no affiliation with them whatsoever. This is simply based on what we purchase all the time and we recommend. And yeah, so as always, this is something that it's important. It's not the most important thing, but it is certainly a big piece of the puzzle, and it's going to be a bigger piece for certain people versus others. And oftentimes I think that in the fitness space, it can get really muddied with, oh, here's the answer, or here's the one thing. And everybody wants the one thing. Everybody wants the one perfect packaged answer, and we all want to figure out like exactly what's wrong with us, right? Like in every aspect of life. And that would be amazing, and I wish that I could say like, hey, there's this one thing, it's just like just one measurement that's off.
Yeah,
oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's a combination of, hey, there might be a few things that are slightly skewed on your blood work. It might be your habits, it's your sleep, it's your diet history, it's what's going on. Like there's all these things that are going on. So when you hear people say like, oh, this is it, that's where it's kind of like, no, this is not the one size fits all solution, but this is certainly important. And of course, it goes without saying that unless your diet mindset and training and all of that and recovery is in place, this will certainly be affected. So what Karina was talking about in the beginning was, we're going to work on those things first, because a lot of times any of these discrepancies could be fixed with that. Actually, like if you get your diet in check, if you're consistently training, if you're doing the proper amount of activity and cardio for you, not overdoing it and not underdoing it, depending on your goals, if you're sleeping well, if your mindset's on point, like if all those things are in check, there still might be something for your blood work, but it also could have corrected itself. So focus on those things first, and then this will be kind of one of those other tools later on that we'd use.
Yeah, definitely start with the basics. And that's why I love what we do so much, because I often refer to it like in medicine as like the first line of defense. Like it's the cheap, like exercise is free, like knowing how to eat right is way cheaper than like the pills you would have to pay for 50 years down the line, like if you don't take care of yourself right now. So yeah, start with the basics, like, and then if things come up, obviously move forward with blood work and anything else you need to order.
Yeah. So we will link that in the show notes for you guys. So you guys will have that link to look over. And like I said, if you're not interested in this panel, there's plenty of other things to choose from on that website as well. For any other questions that you might have for us, you can go to our website, teamlocofit.com. You can check out the other podcasts, read any articles that we've written, and of course, apply for coaching too. So thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.